Hello, and welcome back to the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. I am your co-host, Lance A. Slatton, along with my esteemed colleague and friend, Dr. George Ackerman, also more famously known as Sharon's son, George. Welcome, George.
I think it might be infamously known, but it's an honor to be back. I'm so excited to be with you, Lance, and everyone listening. Last year was our debut, but this year is where we really come through solid with some important guests and really critical topics that I think as a caregiver, I kind of wish I had known. So I hope that this really helps everyone, and please share this again. Lance and I just want everyone to know you're not alone through caregiving.
Absolutely. George, it is the new year. Everybody sets their New Year's resolutions. They have new hopes, new aspirations, and even dreams. But for caregivers, the caregiving doesn't stop just because it's a new year. But what it does allow, I think, for some caregivers to do is to set goals for themselves and for their loved ones. One of the goals I think that is most crucially important, in my opinion, is really getting the help and support from family and friends. Because often when you're a caregiver, and this is true in my case, because I was in my early 20s, it can be a very isolating and lonely feeling. And I don't know that age necessarily matters when you're a caregiver. But for me, because of the age I was in my early 20s, my friends and peers, they had no idea what I was going through. And I know that holds true if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, what have you. But what you do hope, if you are an older, more mature caregiver, is that maybe you do have a friend or someone who has gone through it or is going through it, so they can understand and relate on a more personable, real level than talking to somebody who hasn't gone through it, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they'll say, even, "I understand," but they mean well and their intentions are good, but they can't truly understand if they haven't gone through it. What are some of your goals for caregivers in the new year?
I agree with a lot of what you said, and I kind of always am interested today, looking back at all the things I've learned now going through this advocacy journey, which is different than a caregiving journey. And then also having people like you in my life who've changed it for the better. Wish I had you and all the listeners back then, but now we move forward. And I think communication is really a very important key. I was, in a way, I always say lucky because it was, this whole situation wasn't lucky, but I was lucky that my mother was able to communicate the last 4 years until the last year when she couldn't. But we were able to plan. We were able to really do a lot for her and care for her. But she also played a role. So I think one of the most frustrating things is if people don't also allow their loved one who might have a disease like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's to be part of it and also to make some of the most important decisions of their life.
Absolutely. And talking about communication, because I think that's a great goal for everyone, whether you're a caregiver or not a caregiver, just even in your professional life, communication's key. And I feel like part of that falls into, for caregivers, the issue they have when they're their advocate for their loved one and they're going to that doctor's appointment. Or, I know you had home care for a little while for your mom. Being able to communicate, but having it as a two-way street, right? You might be saying things, but is it being reciprocated? Is it being heard? With our company, we deal with countless families who they don't have the benefit of having a healthcare background or having an experience in the caregiving space. And for myself included, I had a healthcare background, but I didn't know anything about caregiving because, society as a whole and healthcare as a whole doesn't really look at caregiving as a healthcare issue. They look at it as more of a social care issue. And a lot of families, when they go into that waiting room, they got nerves already, right? They're there with their loved one. It can be emotionally difficult and even physically. If it's an elderly couple and you're having to help your husband or your wife in and out of the car, it's not that easy for everyone, right? If they're physically dealing with their own issues, arthritis or, what have you. But then they get into that room finally after that waiting room period and they're meeting with the doctor. And I think we've all experienced this where the doctor is in such a hurry and you're already kind of feeling the anxiety and the nerves of being there. You invariably, you forget to ask something or bring something up, or a lot of people get intimidated. It's called the white coat syndrome, right? They get intimidated or they think whatever the doctor says, that must be the gospel. That must just be the way it is. And they don't want to question that out of a respect for that authority of the white coat. I think being able to openly communicate and kind of advocate, hence the show we're doing, the Care Advocates, advocate for your loved one when you're in that room with that doctor, because maybe it's going to be a month or weeks or who knows how long until you're back there again. I recommend part of communication is, write notes before you go in and do a little checklist. Make sure you get all your stuff, because you don't want to go off your memory when you're in that waiting room. You don't want to forget it once you see the doctor enter the room and they kind of take over, in their role as the doctor. Make sure you're sharing every concern you have. Make sure you're questioning the things you want to question, and don't rely on them to know what they don't know. If your loved one started this new medication and maybe there's been some things you've noticed that aren't for the better, bring that up to the doctor, talk to them, ask those questions, and don't be intimidated. A doctor doesn't know you have a question unless you ask it, right?
And even when you're communicating with your family, I had the pleasure and opportunity to interview one of Muhammad Ali's daughters. And she told me a story which was something shocking but beautiful, where Mr. Ali, when he was going through some of the tougher times with Parkinson's disease, Muhammad Ali obviously is a world-renowned boxer, one of the most famous in all time, like he said, and he often kind of struggled, but then wasn't able to communicate a lot. So he would take magazines and kind of rip them up. So the family for some time was laughing and wasn't sure why, and they would just ignore it. And he would get even more frustrated. So there's an example of communication. But what she did say is, after some time, they decided every Sunday to sit down and actually rip the magazines up all together. And it really changed how he was perceiving what they thought of him. And that's why I think communication, whether it's at the doctor's office, and I did keep a list. Actually, it's funny, I keep my little legal pad and I write everything at the doctor. You don't want to miss something either. But even all the way straight to your own home, it's amazing how, in a way, not only do we learn, but we have to re-teach everyone, how to speak and communicate to your loved one, depending on what infliction or disease they might be going through. In my case, was Parkinson's.
Did just out of curiosity, George, that's interesting, that you shared that about the Ali family. Did they ever understand what the purpose was of ripping up the magazines?
Now they thought maybe, I think it was, he was frustrated at the disease and hard to communicate or
Sure.
explain the inner feelings. I mean, my mother had internal tremors, which is a whole different world, because a lot of individuals like Michael J. Fox have external tremors. So when citizens and fans and just people see him, they understand there's something, neurologically wrong. But when you see someone with Parkinson's who has internal tremors, you don't see that. So you look at the person, you think, oh, they're doing great, but obviously that's not true. And that was really something that my mother communicated to me. That was really frustrating. And even I couldn't understand until now, where, 5 years later after she passed, how much more knowledge I have, because I'm an advocate. But it's very fascinating how important communication is in the home, because we do think about it when you're speaking to a doctor, because you have to get something out fast and you have to make sure you don't miss something. But at home, 24/7, I think a lot of people might be failing to communicate, and they're losing important and valuable time. With my mother, we did have a great relationship, so we communicated well. It wasn't the same with some other family, like my father or brother and things. So it's very interesting, and something I think we'll talk more about this year.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I just want to bring up for viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with these things, and you may be, George, I'm sure, but for our nonverbal loved ones that aren't able or have a hard time verbalizing their needs or what they're feeling, there's wonderful cue boards that you can get on Amazon for just a few dollars that will have like facial emojis. There'll be a pain scale, and you can either point for them and watch their visual cues for their response, or if they're able to point, and then that's another good method for helping to communicate how they're feeling and what they're experiencing if they're not able to verbalize it.
And that's why I love this show, because it's not just about one thing. It's about everybody, how we have to be a family in the fight for all these diseases, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's. Just last night, my wife and I attended a kind of charity event for the United States Holocaust Museum. And as we were there, this young woman next to me who invited us, I don't get out much everyone because I'm always working and advocating, but she just told us her husband has ALS, and it was tough to hear. They're young too; they're in their probably 49, 50s,
Mm.
and the whole night conversation turned on caregiving because she's just mentally trying to prepare. She even read my book on my mother's journey, and she knew my mother well.
Okay.
She was my mother's banker for 20 years, so it's not easy to prepare for what the world of caregiving. But she is trying to do some due diligence, but talking to others and communicating like we did, I hope put her in a little bit more of a safe place. And we offered obviously to come here to our home or anywhere thing we can do to help. But Lou Gehrig's disease is another area. Maybe maybe someday if we want in the future, we could do full shows just on each disorder or
Yeah.
disease because I think it's unfortunately there's so many that will be doing this for 30, 40 years, but I
Right.
think it would be a great idea just because there's not enough awareness for all of these things.
That's exactly right. Here's a woman who, was your mother's banker. She's in her late 40s, early 50s, what have you. Maybe 5 years ago, caregiving and illness and all that probably wasn't even in their topic of the conversation because of their age. But that just goes to show anybody can become a caregiver at any moment, and anybody can need a caregiver at any moment. It's the Rosalind Carter quote, you will be, you are, you have been, or you'll need a caregiver at some point in your life. And that's why we're doing the work we do here at the Care Advocates, and you're doing the work at togetherforsharon.com and us at allhomecarematters.com because of the personal journey that each of us have gone through, and we don't want others to have to go through that journey feeling like they're alone. So thank you so much for sharing that, George. One of the other things too that I'm very big on, other than not not having that feeling of loneliness or isolation, is also practicing self-care, right? Because you with your mother, myself with my father, you get so tunnel visioned and involved in providing for their needs and taking care of them, you can easily forget about taking care of yourself. You start eating the junk food because it's quick and you can grab it. You don't have to prepare it. You say, well, I'll just reschedule that dentist appointment next month, and then next month comes and then you just keep pushing it off. I'm going to stop going to the gym because I got to be there for my loved one. Quickly your health starts to deteriorate and suffer because of the care you're providing to your loved one. So self-care, I feel like, is so vitally important to be able to continue being a good, productive caregiver for your loved one. What's your thoughts on self-care?
Yeah, I mean, exercise, nutrition, and relaxing are things I struggle with just because in my situation was odd. I didn't know my mother wouldn't be with us due to Parkinson's because we were told by so many professional medical doctors, you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. So that put in my brain that she would still be here for many years to come. Unfortunately, when it started progressed Parkinson's and I saw something wasn't right more and more each day, I felt that I needed to kind of give up my own health because I didn't know how much time I had with her. And even as an advocate today, I don't spend a lot of time on the things we should because I feel that we need more advocacy for cure. But I do like to tell that just because we're honest, ethical, and upfront here in the caregiver advocate. But the number one rule is always to take care of yourself first, because if you're not doing that, then you're not going to be a benefit to your loved one. And actually, you could end up, when you're tired and sad and don't have some kind of stress relief, you end up arguing with your loved one and worse things, even though it's not them, it's the disease that's really taking over. So that's the number one thing. Plus the best thing about exercise, you can do it with your loved one if they're able to. And everyone is almost able to. You can do everything now virtually. They have rock steady boxing, which is just moving your arms from a chair. They have dance for PD. They probably dance for everything. They even have dementia choir, which I thought was beautiful. You can sing, and you can do it from home. So there's no, I don't want to be rude, but no excuse anymore. Everyone, you need to not be alone. And there are so many opportunities now. 10 years ago, five even, we didn't have this technology to have shows. I'm not sure if you were doing your show 5 years ago, but
It'll be 5 years in May.
see, so that's when it really, I think, just started, or the tipping of the scale. I know I always regret only one thing. I could never regret anything else, but wish I had a show. I think I've told you with my mother, not about Parkinson's or disease, just about life. Because I would have, I mean, I would be laughing with you, but dream if I could have went back now to a web page of 100 shows of me and my mother just sitting, talking, laughing, and just learning about my life. Because now I have a few notes in my book, Son's Journey, but that's from her sister, my aunt, but it's not the same. It's definitely great. And even last night again, the banker was telling me memories of my mother because they were, we didn't trust a lot with the money and things, and they did with them, so they became like family. But that's the only one regret I will always have. But we have to keep, moving forward. And I do recommend everyone listening, if you're a caregiver, please try and videotape yourself with your loved one. And even if it's tougher times, it could just be for you. I did a journal just because I didn't know how to talk to anyone else really about what was going on, although I had support of my wife and children. So it's a lot of topics. Obviously, we can have hundreds of shows on, and we probably will. But that's kind of my little take on the importance of self care, even though I violate the rules. You need to not follow me on this one.
Well, I want to say I think you're downplaying it, George. It's not a little take; that's a big take. I mean, you built this almost memorial like advocacy resource website, all in honor of your mom. Together for Sharon. Your mom is Sharon, but talking about the support and everything, I'd be remiss, and I'll say it for you. You know, your wife is a huge advocate right alongside you and is a part of this journey every step of the way with the work that you're doing and that she's doing. But not all families have that benefit. Like my wife, she was a great support, with my dad. But not all families have that. And I think, finding that support from your family, and whether it's through a media, I know some families have to use a mediator, George, and, being an attorney, you can appreciate how significant that is because they're all coming from a different point of view. You have family that lives long distance. It's hard for them to appreciate and understand really what you're trying to relay. They think you're exaggerating. You're just, making things up. So what I always say is before you go to the step of having to hire a mediator or even an arbitrator, talk to that. This goes back to the doctor and asking those questions. Talk to the doctor if you're encountering, pushback and roadblocks from your family and it's causing division. I've seen some of the closest families fall apart over this very issue of what's best for mom or best for dad because they have opposing ideas. First, have your paperwork in order before you need it. And what I mean by that is don't wait for the crisis to happen to then try to get all of the, power of attorneys and your advanced directives and living wills in place. Have that conversation beforehand because that can avoid a lot of things. If you know specifically what mom or dad's or whoever the person is, what their wishes are in the event that there's a medical crisis, and then find out who's being designated. One person might be over health, one might be over finances, and have that as an open family conversation so there's no surprises. And if you still have pushback and they're not believing, have a conversation with the doctor and say, would you mind calling my brother, my sister in Arizona? And they have questions and they don't really understand what mom's going through right now. Make them a believer. But one of the other things is really just, taking care of yourself, having that communication. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and I think a lot of it all falls under what we started with, George, is just communication. As simple as it is, it's one of the hardest things I think for people to really put into practice. Do you have any other suggestions?
Now, as we wrap up to another beautiful episode, and again, I hope everyone listening will share this. It's we don't want anything in return, but everyone to realize you're not alone. And the only way we can do that is if we have the support of all of you. It only takes a minute to just press share. But as a wrap up, as you said, communication seems to be an important theme today. But getting others to support you, so you have ability now from virtual again, home, to join support groups that are out there, reconnect with the family and friends that you might not have seen. Unfortunately, my mother, some of her closest friends kind of vanished at the end, which was sad. And that's another important area to talk about. Some people can't handle seeing their best friend or loved one kind of, fading away, but they still love you and still need your support. and also connecting with loved ones and friends, as I mentioned a bit ago. Things like minor little things I wouldn't even have thought of because we're so busy running around caregiving with appointments and food and bills, but grab a photo album when you were, younger, take them drive back, not literally but to memory lane. If you have video, no one has DVDs or anymore video VHS, but you probably could still get it put onto the somehow streaming these days and just sit and watch. We watch my wedding once a year with my family, and it's a beautiful time, but it's also tough. But the nice thing from it is the dance I had with my mother. It was a 3 minutes of Barry Manilow, I Am Your Child. My mother loved him, and then also a little when they went around the table with the mic, that we caught it. I didn't even realize. Remember, my mother said like a few minutes of wishes, and those are things that no disease can ever take from us. But if you don't keep sharing it and reliving it, you might forget. So we don't want to ever forget. And as always, it's an honor to serve with you, work with you, and learn from you. And I think this show again is a platform for so many to grow, learn, and also like I said, we both learn too from everyone we meet. So I'm excited for the future together, and hope everyone out there is doing well, taking care of yourself and also your loved one, because you're never alone in this fight.
You're not. And, I do want to put you on the spot before we say goodbye until our next episode. And hopefully by the next episode, it will be out. But you're working on your third book that should be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks. Do you want to share any about that so people can be on the lookout for it?
I appreciate it. This is actually a different book, and I have to reiterate, I don't really want to write books, but what I've been finding is in my lifetime and things as I'm an advocate, I don't see, and I really think we need to, and that inspired me to use some of my police background. And the book is called Policing and Parkinson's Disease, and it's about interactions with people who have Parkinson's, been diagnosed, and law enforcement. And there's so many shocking things I've discovered. I mean, we wouldn't have time now to get into it, but my dream come true would be if we could add the words Parkinson's disease to every police academy throughout the United States and every actual agency in their standing operating procedures, just those words. Because right now, in my research, and there's over 200 references, so it's actually kind of a mixture of my background and my life with law enforcement, but then switches to literal research, almost PhD book, where I actually have interviews in qualitative format, which is surveys. I interviewed many individuals who have Parkinson's on their experiences with police, and then the opposite, police and their interactions with people with Parkinson's. So
Yeah.
very interesting. And then I interviewed one academy in every state in the country. Also have important findings and suggestions. Of course, my dream again, it's really just to have it reach these agencies and schools, and without everyone listening, that might be difficult because it's still a fight as an advocate for Parkinson's to get awareness. But as long as I'm here, I'll still keep doing that. And lastly, Parkinson's, if you're not aware of, everyone listening, the involuntary movement disorder, one of the fastest growing neurological in the world. And unfortunately, if someone's driving, whether it's 5 p.m., 11 p.m., and an officer pulls them over, maybe for speeding, or not that everyone's speeding, but or a traffic infraction, which everyone can happen to anyone. Well, if that individual might not have taken their medications or they wore off, there have been indications and literal scenarios where officer may think the person drugged or drinking while intoxicated, and that doesn't end well. Hopefully it does, but there's major steps that the person can take with Parkinson's, the caregiver, and the police officer on the other side to de-escalate any areas, and that would be heartbreaking to hear. A very bad outcome, and this is a pro-positive police book. It's not to kind of de-escalate, and like they did in 2024 around the country. This is positive for everybody, and it is really a tool for caregivers, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll be on the lookout for it. I can't wait to get my copy. And Dr. George Ackerman, Sharon's son from togetherforsharon.com. Always a pleasure, my friend. And we'll see you again next time here on the Care Advocates. Thank you for joining us again here at the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.